In this video, we're going to take a quick look at one way that you can verify that your MQ configuration will work with Q Replication. Before we start though, let's quickly cover what we need to have on our systems before we can do the verification. First, we need our source and target databases defined. We'll use DB2 databases. We also need the ability to create a few tables in them. However, for the purpose of this video, in case you're wondering, we're going to assume you have not created the Q Replication control tables in these two databases. That's because it's one of the steps we're going to be doing as we go through the verification. Next, we need two Q managers up and running. The Q managers are part of what we'll be verifying. Then, of course, the most important thing is that we need to have created all of our MQ objects for Q Replication within these two Q managers. You'll also need the DB2 client tools for Windows. That's because we'll be doing the verification through a DB2 user interface called the Replication Center. One variation to point out here is that if you're just in a learning mode, you're probably setting all of this up on a single system. And that's fine. The verification works the same whether you've set up on one system or two. Okay, here I am on my Windows system, and I'm going to show you where to start the Replication Center from. First, find a DB2 folder. I have multiple, but just pick one that you have. And look for General Administration Tools, and then the fourth one down is the Replication Center, and let's launch it. Once it's up, we're going to expand the Q Replication folder here and look for a folder for Q Capture servers. We want to create tables for Q Capture's metadata, and that's a right click off of this folder. We get a wizard, and we don't need to do anything with this first dialog, so we can just click Next. The Q Capture server is the source database, and that's where we're going to store the capture metadata. In this particular case, I'm going to choose the DB2 sample database and then click Next. You can take the default for the Q Capture schema. There's almost never a need to change it, so let's click Next. Okay, this is the first dialog where we have an opportunity to verify some of our MQ objects. As you see here, we have three fields that we have to enter, and they all contain MQ information. We're going to start by providing the Q Manager name that we want to use with Q Capture. Now, the Replication Center does a very nice thing here of listing the Q managers that are available over on the source system. It actually queried the source system for this information. Now, I follow a convention of giving my Q manager the same name as the database that it's being used with. So in this particular case, I'm going to choose the Q manager name sample. I now have ellipses opened up for these other two fields, and that's going to give me an opportunity to tell Q Capture about Qs I want it to use. However, I'm not going to explain what these Qs are or how they're used at this point. All I want to do is fill them in so we can get to the point where we can see how to do our verification of the Qs. Once we've filled in all the fields, we have a new link that opens up on the page. It's called Validate WebSphere MQ Objects. And this is a thing we're going to click to have Q Replication test our Q Manager and these two Qs to make sure they're good to go for Q Capture. So let's click that link now and see what happens. In my configuration here, I get 0 tests failed. What this means is I'm ready to go on the Q Capture side. I've got no problems over there. If there had been errors, I would have gotten error messages and error message numbers. I could have looked the information up and corrected any problem I might have found. With everything okay, we can now complete the wizard, which will create our capture control tables and save the MQ information for whenever we want to run the Q Capture program. When I'm done, a little icon shows up within my Replication Center that represents both the source database and my capture server. Technically, I need to take the same action over on the Q Apply side or on the same side as the target database. However, to keep this video shorter, I've already done that work on the Apply side because it looks very similar to what's on the Capture side. That lets us move on to the next step, which is creating a Q map. To create a Q map, we're going to navigate down through our Q Capture server here and look for a folder called, amazingly enough, Replication Q Maps. And from there, there's an action to create a Q map. And that brings us to a nice little dialog where we can fill in some more MQ information. First though, notice that my Q map needs to know which target server or apply server is going to go with this capture server. And I get a little ellipses, and I have one defined. I'm going to select it, and now I'm ready to go with filling in the names of my MQ objects. We have 3 pieces of MQ information we need to provide to Q Replication. However, as with the capture control tables, I'm not going to explain what each of these objects is. We're just going to select them from a list and get to the point where we can see how to validate them. Let's see, we're going to select the send queue over on the capture side. Click and OK. And then the receive queue for the apply side. We're going to take the long name here. And then we're going to go for the administration queue as it's known over on the apply side. And good, we're ready to go. With those 3 fields completed, we now have a new link open up on this dialog called Validate Queues. This is where we're going to do the rest of our verification of our MQ for Q Replication. So let's click this link and take a look at the dialog that it brings up. Now this dialog lets us do 2 things. One of them, it lets us validate or verify that our Q definitions are appropriate for Q Replication. It also lets us send test messages in both directions between our Q managers to verify that they're communicating properly. And this is a very nice thing to do before the first time you ever run your capture and apply programs. All we have to do now is click the start button and look for green check marks, hopefully. I got green check marks because each of my queues has an appropriate definition for Q Replication, and I was able to send a test message from each queue manager, and it arrived successfully at the other queue manager, and that happened in both directions. You're now ready to finish your replication topology and start your Q Replication. Okay, I'm not going to go through the rest of the Q Replication setup, mostly because this video is already long enough as it is. If you have questions, please ask them in the comment section of where this video is posted. Thanks.